Alright, today's episode is not gonna be about how to fix your chair, but how to take your first step towards creating this beautiful equipment. That's right, because today I'm launching my brand new video series that's gonna be all about creating equipment like this. And you wanna know the best part? I'm also gonna make all of the patterns I use for this equipment available on my website and on my Etsy store so that you don't have to go through the process of creating that yourself. Without further ado, let's get started. So in this video, you will learn a little bit about the materials and how to go from plain leather like this to leather straps like these. You will also learn how to attach buckles and how to connect the different pieces in a bridle and how to make a very simple bit. I recommend that you stick with this tutorial all the way to the end, because if you do these steps, the rest of the bridle making process will be a lot easier, trust me. Okay, the first step on our bridle making journey is learning how to make leather straps. So let's talk a little bit about the leather first.
I think making hobby horses, and equipment for that matter, is really similar to cooking. You know, the better your ingredients, the better the final product will be. Therefore, if you pick a nice leather, you're really gonna set yourself up for success. So as of now, I only use fake leather, and the main thing I check for is that the front and the back of the leather is similar color. Because you can see here, this is my black leather, and I absolutely despise it because it has this gray weaving on the back, and it looks really bad when you make bridles with it. Here, I'm showing it here. It kind of looks like the bridle, like the edges are like coming off a little bit, so it just looks really poor quality. So again, similar color in the back and the front, and then I also check the thickness, so I go with about 1 millimeter for my fabric, but it cannot be too slippery and it cannot be too soft. You don't want it to act too much like, you know, a fabric that drapes over something. You want it to kind of have this sturdiness. When you get your leather, it will look something like this. So we'll go ahead and fold it down the middle on the long side and make sure that the corners and the sides are aligned. And then we will put pins here on the folded side, and this is where we'll be making our straps. So I always make all of my straps on one side, and then the anatomical parts and other shapes go on the other side. But I'll walk you through more on that later. So now I'll just do the sewing machine settings really quick. So I have a straight seam, and I'm going on the middle speed here not to go too fast. And then the stitch size I have somewhere in the middle, if maybe not a little bigger. Alright, now it's time to sew our first seam. So this is what you're going to be doing now, spending a lot of time on. So a strap has 2 seams, and we're going to do both of those seams all the way down the long side of the fabric. So I'm just going to start sewing here, and I'm going to keep really close to the edge. And as I go, I'm going to remove the pins. If you want to be really sure that your seams are straight, you can make a marking going all the way down the leather, but this is a little bit too time consuming for me, so I have a reference that I look at on my sewing foot so that I know that I'm in the same kind of margin from the edge at all times. So that was the first seam done. Now let's move on to making the second seam. Before you start making the second seam, there is one important decision you have to make, and that is the width of your strap. And to determine the width of your strap, I recommend that you get your buckle that you're gonna use, and then you try to kind of measure out how wide that buckle is, and you're gonna make sure that the strap can then fit through that hole. So I simply just put the buckle on top of the leather, and then I put it right up against the edge. And now I'm gonna try to determine kind of where I wanna put that second seam, okay? So remember now that the seam shouldn't be all the way out to the edge, because you still wanna have that little bit of margin you see as I have on the other edge, right? So it's like margin, seam, and then it's the middle of the strap, seam, margin. So I made a little bit of marking here as a reference for myself. However, as I mentioned, I work a little bit more with like intuition, you know? So I know, for example, if I keep my sewing foot edge to edge there with the leather, my strap is actually gonna be the perfect width. So you're gonna see here in a second, the marking is actually gonna come by. But you see here, my sewing foot is right there on the margin of the strap, and there comes the marking. Pretty cool, right? And this is also a huge time saver because, again, I don't have to draw markings with a pen all the way down the leather, you know? So if you can find yourself a little reference like that, then that will be perfect. Alright, now we have reached the end of the strap. And look at this strap, is looking gorgeous. Now, I know you're probably excited and you're all like, whoa, let's cut it out, let's make a bridle, right? But I'm gonna stop you right there, because if we cut it, we're gonna have 2 separate pieces of leather again, and we're gonna have to restart and pinning and then sewing the seam again, and it might be uneven. So before we cut out the first strap, we're gonna make a second one. because then we can cut the first one out and then still have the leather kind of be perfectly layered on top of each other. And this is gonna make a lot of sense later, because when we make these anatomical parts, by doing this way, we already have the leather layered on top of each other perfectly, so we won't have to kind of cut out. This is so advanced. You'll see later. Just do this. Just keep one strap on the leather and you'll be perfectly fine. So now we can cut out the one closest to the edge, okay? Closest to the edge, not the inner one. And it was pretty nice overall, but here it was a little bit too thick. Like, you know, my seam had gotten a little bit too far away from the margin. So then you just go back in and trim the edges to your liking.
So there we have it, our very first leather strap. If I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, this is, in my opinion, probably the most boring step of making the bridles. But trust me, when you're making the bridles, you're gonna be so happy that you did this step now, so that you can just cut the pieces then later when you're like making the actual bridle. So the next step is learning how to attach a buckle and how to make holes in the strap so that you can connect these two pieces to make a piece of the bridle. Because all a bridle is essentially just a bunch of pieces or like straps with buckles and with holes, and you connect them together and then you have a bridle. So simple.
So for this step you will need your freshly created leather strap and a buckle and a ring as an example. So let's start with the buckle, but first I'll show you this example here of what I meant with the buckle and the connecting strap with the holes. So this is like how a basic bridle looks like, so you have the buckle and the hole connector, and you just thread the connector through the buckle, and there you have it. A bridle, yeah. Okay, so let's attach our buckle first, and we'll use my favorite tool, the hole puncher or the hole taker or whatever it's called. So measure about 2 centimeters from the end and then punch a hole using the smallest setting on your hole puncher, or just cut a hole with a pair of scissors, I don't know. So now our strap looks like this and our buckle looks like this. So I have a center bar buckle and it's named after the center bar, and you want the little middle piece there to always point towards the end of the strap, so away from the middle. So I'm just gonna thread the strap on, and then I'm gonna thread the little middle piece here through the hole that we just created, and then pull the strap out on the other side. So you can help the little middle piece there get to the right side, and then fold the strap over itself, and this is where you're gonna create a seam and secure the buckle in place. Be really careful here not to sew in the buckle. I've done that, and the sewing machine needle will explode and potentially might even hurt you. So keep a little bit of safety distance to that buckle. And there you have it. It's not much more difficult than that. Now you have a beautiful looking seam and a perfectly secured buckle. So let's now do the connector part. I'm gonna start with cutting off the edges here to create a triangle shape, and this will actually make it much easier to thread the strap through the buckle. You can also put an extra seam there, kind of to follow that triangle shape. It will make it much more durable, but for the sake of this video, I'm skipping that. Then use your hole taker or hole puncher to make some holes here. I'm gonna make 3. Now it will look something like this, and when you're finished, just take the connector piece, take the buckle piece, and then put them together. Just like that. So as promised, I will also show you an example of how to attach a ring to this strap, and this goes for anything shaped like this, so D-rings or snap hooks. So you simply pull the strap through, fold it over itself, and you put a seam right there. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and there you go.
Congratulations, you've now learned how to attach a buckle and other hardware to your strap, and then how to connect them together. Not that hard, right? You're gonna be crafting bridles like a pro in no time. So we're now officially done with the leather straps, and the last thing we'll do for the tutorial is learning how to make a simple bit. If you're not really familiar with bridles, a bit is essentially what goes in the mouth and what you use like to attach the reins so that you can steer the horse. You can make really advanced bits, but you can also make really simple ones, and that's the ones we're going to be covering in this tutorial. So let's get started.
We will be using penny today as our test subject. So grab 2 rings and then some steel wire for the middle part. So we're gonna go ahead and measure out the middle part first. So put the steel wire through the mouth of the horse and make sure to leave a little bit of margin here on each side. And when you think you've found the right length, go ahead and cut that off. You should have about this much sticking out on each side. Now we're gonna create a loop using a tool of your choice, really. So create a small loop and then hook on one of the rings and then go ahead and close that loop. Half of the bit is now done, so before we do the second loop, let's just put the bit on Penny and see how it looks and if we need to adjust anything. So this side looks good, but I think we have a bit too much sticking out on the other side. So I'm just gonna go ahead and trim that down a little bit before I do the second loop. So pay attention now how you folded the first loop and make sure you fold the second loop to kind of match that first one. So just put that ring on there and then close it shut. So let's just try it on Penny once more to see if we need to adjust anything. And I think that looks pretty solid, don't you think?
And there you go, your very first simple bit. Wasn't that hard, right? So I'm now very happy to announce that you have officially learned everything that you need to know before starting to make your first bridle. So keep an eye out on my channels not to miss when the next tutorial comes out, because I really believe we're gonna have a lot of fun with this. That was it for this episode. I'm so happy that you watched all the way until now. If you'd like to support me, you can leave a like or a comment on this video or purchase one of the patterns from my website or my Etsy store. Thank you so much, guys. I love you so much and see you in the next video. Happy hobby horsing!